So we continue our study, and we are out of section 1, which is the essence of the liturgy. We're in section 2 now, which is time and space in the liturgy. So chapter 1 of that is the relationship of the liturgy to time and space and some preliminary questions. I love this part of this first paragraph because it gets at the heart of so many of the problems that are here in how we view liturgy, how we view worship. He poses the question, can there really be special holy places and holy times in the world of Christian faith? Christian worship is surely a cosmic liturgy which embraces both heaven and earth. The Epistle to the Hebrews stresses that Christ suffered outside the gate and adds this exhortation. Therefore, let us go forth to him outside the camp, bearing abuse for him. Is the whole world not now his sanctuary? Is sanctity not to be practiced by living one's daily life in the right way? Is our divine worship not a matter of being loving people in our daily life? Is that not how we become like God and so draw near to the true sacrifice? Can the sacral be anything other than imitating Christ in the simple patience of daily life? Can there be any other holy time than the time for practicing love of neighbor, whenever and wherever the circumstances of our life demand it? Whoever asks questions like these touches on a crucial dimension of the Christian understanding of worship, but overlooks something essential about the permanent limits of human existence in this world, overlooks the not yet that is part of Christian existence, and talks as if the new heaven and new earth had already come. So I love that because it talks about basically, and you can see this in a lot of Protestant groups, where there's sort of an understanding of, Jesus came, he tore the temple veil in two, there's no more mediation needed whatsoever. Jesus has come, there's no separation, we don't need any person or thing or sacrifice else to get us to be in connection with God anymore. But the problem that Ratzinger is looking at here is he's saying, well, we do need mediators still. There's still mediation that happens because we're still between the already and the not yet. We're in between. So that's the big thing here. He says here that the church fathers had these 3 steps that they looked at. They said there's shadow, image, and reality. So there's these 3 stages as far as Christian worship is concerned. And this is as far as time is concerned too, the time and the space. So really what he goes into in this chapter is that the first level is the level of the institution of the event. This is when, of course, Christ came, he offers himself, and as we looked at in the first part of this book, he was talking about how we go from a replacement worship where we take an animal sacrifice, or in the more corrupted sense, maybe human sacrifice, which of course does not fulfill what God wants from us. He wants self-sacrifice, but we don't have a way to do that, so we have to have these replacements that are never quite sufficient. Even in the scriptures before Jesus comes into the world, you can see that inadequacy. And now Jesus has come, there are no more animal sacrifices that are needed because he is the one sacrifice that is needed now to worship. True, these are all good things. That's the institution of the event that happens. But there needs to be a way to make that reality present. And this is something that I've seen a lot, especially when I was a Protestant still, and I was wrestling with these questions and looking at Catholicism. I realized, okay, I believed that God had become man. I believed that he had done miracles and had preached and had healed and had died for our sins and rose again. But then the question is, how do I obtain that sacrifice still? And I think one of the answers that I had to struggle to get to was the fact that we still have mediators. And I think that sometimes the Protestants will rail so hard against that. You don't need priests, you don't need stuff. It's very mind-oriented. It's very, if I just direct my attention, if I just say a prayer, I will be able to commune with God. And that sacrifice will just become manifest in my mind, in my spirit, in my soul, and that's good enough. And I think that looking into this idea that Cardinal Ratzinger and Pope Benedict was looking at, that Jesus establishes something that replaces the temple worship, but there's still a new temple worship on earth because we're still traversing in this land. We're still on our way. We're still man on the way. We are humanity on our way to Christ still. We're still in the not yet between now and heaven. We're not in heaven yet. But now that we have the institution, now that we have the moment Jesus has come and he's fulfilled everything, he's offered the one sacrifice which bridges, right, the exitus and the reditus. It fixes the path from the going out from God and the returning back to God, being redeemed. That's stage one. That is, right, the shadow. The image, then, is what he says is the middle level. And this is the strictly liturgical level. This is revealed, as he says, in the Last Supper. So he says, these words and actions form the core of Christian liturgical celebration, which was further constructed out of the synthesis of the synagogue and temple liturgies. All right, but he says also that, these liturgical signs mean nothing outside of the fact and the reality that is being made present of the cross and the resurrection. He says, without the cross and resurrection, Christian worship is null and void, and a theology of liturgy that omitted any reference to them would really just be talking about an empty game, right? If we don't believe that liturgy, the middle level, the image now that Jesus has brought after he's established the saving event, if we don't believe that has reference, not just mentally, but in some sort of bringing about of reality into the moment, the present moment, he said it's almost as if, what did he say? It's like banknotes without funds to cover them. So he says, basically, if the liturgical action, if this middle stage, which Christ has established for us as a mediator, right? So we'll keep talking about that. As a mediating stage in our liturgy, in our bringing the making present of that saving event, or saving events, right? There's more than one. It's his life, it's his death, it's his resurrection, it's his ascension into heaven, is being made present now. So he says the word semel, or ephapax, once for all, which the epistle to the Hebrews emphasizes so vigorously, in contrast to the multitude of repeated sacrifices in the Old Covenant, is strictly applicable. Okay, so that's stage two. Stage one, the saving act. It replaces the temple worship is done away with because now we have the perfect, not just replacement sacrifice, but we have a representative sacrifice, a way for us to attach ourselves to this one sacrifice. Stage two is the strictly liturgical, the middle, so shadow to image, and then to reality. And this is the parts that we started with in this chapter, where Ratzinger was saying we don't want to be over hasty about the future part. There are particular preachers who will preach in a sense of a very definitive, if you've said this prayer, if you've done this thing, then there's nothing left. You're already saved. There's nothing you can do to hurt your salvation. There's nothing you can do. It's true that there's nothing you can do to make God love you less. God doesn't love anybody more or less than anyone else, but it's how far we remove ourselves from his presence. When we refer to ourselves in this very final understanding of I am saved and there's nothing else, full stop, right? As Catholics, we say I am saved by my baptism, I am being saved, and I hope to be saved. The third level is about the eschaton, or eschatological reality, the reality of Christ being triumphantly seated on the throne at the end of time, the second coming of Christ. So he says here, the semel, the once for all, wants to attain its semper, always. Sacrifice is only complete when the world has become the place of love. Right? And again, back to this every time. This is such, as difficult as sometimes this book gets, he keeps coming back to certain charismatic threads, and this is one of them. We are incorporated into the great historical process by which the world moves toward the fulfillment of God being all in all. Right? All in all keeps coming back. That exitus to reditus, that exit to return, that redemption, that God being made all in all, that this is the goal. This is the point of creation itself. And of course, as human beings, we are made to be in God. We're made to find our rest in God. So, he sums this up pretty well in page 60 here in my book. He says, this once-for-all event has become the ever-abiding form of the liturgy. In the first stage, the eternal is embodied in what is once for all. The second stage is the entry of the eternal into our present moment in the liturgical action. Okay, the entry of the eternal into our present moment in the liturgical action, right? That what we're doing is not a simply liturgical motions. We're not simply doing symbolic things for the sake of themselves. We're doing them because they're making present the reality of the life, death, resurrection, and ascension of Jesus right now. So when we say in the Eucharist that Jesus is becoming substantially present in his body, blood, soul, and divinity in the Eucharist, we're not just symbolically remembering these things. We actually believe that that sacrifice, that once-for-all sacrifice, is being made present right now, right here. And that's what we're being drawn into that. That's the point of the liturgy. The third stage is the desire of the eternal to take hold of the worshipper's life and ultimately of all historical reality. So we're not, as he said, over hasty. We're not saying, okay, there's nothing left to do. There's no more mediation. No, we are in the process of allowing God to work in our lives. And in that liturgical action, we are made more ready, more suited to our duties. That once for all sacrifice and power and grace seeps into us more and more, the more we're present at the liturgy, the more that we let the liturgy, not just the act itself, like the ex opere operato, the fact of the thing being done, like the Eucharist is there, or the prayers are said, but then there's the subjective sense of where I need to let that in. I could go to 100 masses in a row, but if I'm not letting God touch my heart, not in just like an emotional way, right, but in a substantial way where I recognize what's happening, I'm allowing God to change me, it needs to be taking hold of my whole life. So it's not just mechanical. So these are the three parts of the liturgy. This is that time and space, how the past event is made present, and the future is made present as well in that liturgical action as we're waiting for the eschaton, as we're waiting for the fulfillment of all things, and the redemption, the arc of the exitus and reditus is being healed by the Redeemer. I just want to read this last section because the last paragraph of each of these chapters is golden. You could read the last paragraph of each chapter and probably get a sense of the whole from it because he summarizes so perfectly. He says here, we finally discover the answer to the question with which we started. After the tearing down of the temple curtain and the opening up of the heart of God in the pierced heart of the crucified, do we still need a sacred space, a sacred time, mediating symbols? Yes, we do need them, precisely so that through the image, through the sign, we learn to see the openness of heaven. We need them to give us the capacity to know the mystery of God in the pierced heart of the crucified. Christian liturgy is no longer replacement worship, but the coming of the representative Redeemer to us, an entry into his representation that is an entry into reality itself. We do indeed partake in the heavenly liturgy, but this participation is mediated to us through earthly signs, which the Redeemer has shown to us as the place where his reality is to be found. In liturgical celebration, there is a kind of turning around of exitus to reditus, of departure to return, of God's descent to our ascent. The liturgy is the means by which earthly time is inserted into the time of Jesus Christ and into its present. It is the turning point in the process of redemption. The shepherd takes the lost sheep onto his shoulders and carries it home. It's just wonderful. So again, and I love that he keeps using the same terminology, right? He's taking all this wonderful wisdom from the church fathers and he's giving us, he's packaging it in a way that he's both synthesizing what's come before him. He's taking modern theologians, older theologians, weaving this one narrative where the liturgy is about this return to God, this redemption. That redemption needed a redeemer. When that arc from leaving God to coming back from God was broken, as we talked about a chapter or two ago, that the liturgy is the way that that present healing reality that Jesus came to give us is made present, and that our future hope is made present. But we don't want to be presumptuous. We don't want to say, the liturgy is just something to kind of like get us through till we get home to heaven. No, it's making present. It is forming us into heavenly people. It's forming us into saints. It's bringing Jesus' life and love and our fulfillment in God to us in that liturgy in a way that can't be found in simply living out a Christian life. And that's kind of a oxymoron, I guess. Living out the Christian life is being a liturgical people. It is living a liturgical life. We can't really live a properly Christian life without the liturgy, because otherwise we're just calling to mind, we're memorizing, we're everything is just a memory of events that none of us were present to. This is what makes it present. It's still hidden under those mediating earthly realities, but they're there. It's substantially present, and it's made tangible to us through our faith, right? Which is a gift. So we need the time and space. We need the mediating symbols. And the next chapter we will get into is about sacred places and the significance of the church building. So we're getting more and more concrete, I think. Time is a little bit, as maybe a particularly beloved Time Lord said, is a wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey thing as far as the liturgy is concerned. The liturgy contains the present and the past and the future all at once. So that's it. That's all I got for you right now. We will be back with chapter 2 in part 2, Sacred Places, the significance of the church building, in the next video. All right. Send some comments. Let me know if there's things you want me to talk about. And see you in the next video.